Hi everybody, it's Sally here. Today I'm going to be talking about doing some different rib stitches on your Knitmaster Silver Reed type of machine with either the SRP 50 or one of the SRP 60 versions of the ribber. The ones I'm going to be doing are, if you've got the SRP 60 instruction book, they're the ones on pages 29 and 30 of the instruction manual. First of all, I just thought we'd do a quick recap of how the operating table works. Because once you get your head round the fact that all the instructions you need to know to knit any one of these stitches, oops, sorry, I'm hitting the stand, are in these tables, then you should be able to go through your instruction book and follow the instructions for knitting any one of the different pattern ribs in here. So I had a little go at this the other day, and just to refresh my memory, and that was my English rib. English rib is also known as Half Fisherman's Rib, because this particular version only tucks on one bed and not on both, but it produces much the same effect visually, just on one side of the knitting. Then you got the swung English rib, which was this one, which is pretty much English rib, but you're using your racking handle to swing the rib bed from side to side and produce these little wavy lines. And then the variation of the swung English rib again is much the same as the previous two. Except you've got a needle arrangement in here, which is what produces this pretty like checkerboard effect, and that in combination with the using the racking handle to swing the bed gives you those three different stitches. So let's just have a recap on the operating table with the carriage in view. Hopefully you can see it all, more or less all of it. The pictograms at the top of this table represent the different parts of the machine. On the left hand side you've got first of all the pattern selecting panel, which for all of these that we're going to do today, there's nothing in that box there, so you've got no punch card to put in the machine, and the pattern selector knob, the release knob is set at the circle, which is stop, it's not released. The next section coming along refers to your knitter carriage, this one here, this pictogram here, and the first box on the left represents what the side levers are doing. The middle box is what your cam lever is doing, this thing here which determines your stitch type, and then obviously the side lever on the other side. So left side lever, right side lever, cam dial. Then the next section is for the ribber connecting arm, this one here. This represents the little auxiliary yarn feeder, which needs to be set at the circle, and the drive lever, which should be down. Then you've got your two tension dials. The top one, it's a bit misleading, I think, this, because you tend to think if that's got the thing at the bottom, it must mean the ribber one, but it doesn't, it's round the other way. It represents where the little knob on your cam dial is. So this is the knitter one on the left hand side, and the bottom one is the rib. That tells you what to set your tension at. And then the next box is for what your rib carriage is doing. Your set levers, your rustle levers, and the pick knob and the driving cam thingy down at the bottom there. Then the next one along gives you the position of the ribber bed, and that's the lower position, and the one that's dark up here is the one we're going to be using, which is the top position. In other words, your rib bed needs to be fully pushed up to engage with your knit carriage. Then what your racking handle should be doing, and your pitch. So P is for pitch, full pitch, which means that the needles are directly opposite each other on both beds, and the racking position is at 5. Let's therefore make sure I'm going to be set up to do the first cast on. That's the settings for the cast on across here. So nothing in the punch card selector, it's set to stop. I'm going to thread up my yarn on the left hand side. So I just tie a little slip knot or little loop in it and drop it down between the beds. Hook it round a ribber clamp or a knitter clamp and just park it for a minute on the left hand side. So double checking across that I've got everything here. So I did my pattern panel, that's set to stop. My side levers are at the circle, which is forward on both sides. That is set to circle, the driving lever is down. The cast on tensions for your zigzag row are 0 and 0, so let's turn it right down to 0 on both tension dials. My set levers on the ribber carriage both need to be at 1. My pick knob is there, it's at the little arrow setting. The driving lever is set at 1. My river bed is up. I'm on P. Oh no, I'm not on H. I'm on P now, and I'm on P5. So all of those things are in the right place, and my carriage is on the right hand side at the moment. So what I do is I leave my carriage on the right, but I feed my yarn in at the left. So now I'm going to pull my needles out to the position I want them in. I'm going to pull out about 70 needles, alternate needles as for 1x1 rib, which is given in the needle arrangement here at this part of the operating table. And then obviously the intermediate needles come up into position from the ribber. And I always have the end stitch on both sides as being a knitter stitch when I'm doing my 1x1 rib, unless it tells you otherwise, which it might. So I've pulled both sets of needles forward to D position. This is just a bit of a safety check that I do it like that to make sure that I've got my pitch setting correct, that the needles aren't crashing into one another. And when I move that carriage across, obviously there's no yarn in here at the minute, it's just to make sure that they're all in the right place. I'm going to knit pack properly and not going to cause any problems when I actually thread yarn in and start knitting. So if I move my carriage over, and as I move it over, I'm going to pick up my yarn into the yarn feeder, and it's fed into the carriage. I don't know if you can quite see that, but there it is fed in. It's a bit tricky trying to get the whole thing in view whilst you can still see it. So I'm now ready to do my zigzag row. I will knit back, and I've got zigzag stitches on those needles. I now need a cast on comb. It's what tells me what to do in my sequence of moves on the left hand side here. After I've knit one row, there's the direction arrow from left to right. I suspend my cast on comb with weights. So I've painted the 2 middle prongs of my cast on comb with red nail polish. I don't know if you can see that. So when I poke it up from underneath the river bed, I can see where it needs to go. And there they are lined up with naught. I'm going to fiddle in my wire. And as I've only got 70 stitches on, I will just add 2 river weights. Evenly weighted. Not one in the middle and one on the side, so they're both on the side there. So river weights now in. Now I'm going to knit my 3 circular rows, and in order to do that you have to set the rib carriage to slip on the first row, so you just knit across on the top bed, then you reverse it, you set the knit carriage to slip and the ribber to knit a ribber row, and then knit another knit row on the knitter. So you've done 3 circular rows, and that seals the cast on. So what it tells me to do here is to set my left set lever on the ribber carriage to 0, which is that instruction there. So I'm going to push that up. And it also tells me here to change my rib tension to 2. Now you wouldn't normally do this on normal 1x1 ribbing, but because pretty early on in English rib you're going to start tucking, you obviously want a little bit of slack on the ribber cast on. So you turn the rib cast on up to 2 and then knit your 3 circulars. So that now, having pushed that lever up to 0, means it's going to slip on the ribber bed in that direction, in the direction it's going in. So 1 row. Then the instructions tell me to set my cam lever on the knitter to slip. So when I come back in the other direction, it will slip on the knitter, but because my right set lever is still at 1, it will knit the stitches on the ribber. Then if I set that back to my knitter cam dial to knit again, come back this way, the set lever on the left hand side is still at 0, so it will slip on the ribber and knit the knitter. And that's my 3 circular rows completed. Now this is the point at which, when I'm doing any rib stitch, I add in my little ravel cord, which of course has gone walkies. Oh, never mind, find another one. And this is my tried and tested tip for removing frilly edges on ribbing. Any gauge of machine, any type of yarn. So get my ravel cord. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay the ravel cord in the channel between the 2 beds, when I'm not tying it in a knot, that is. So I keep thinking I can feel a knot, but I can't. It's all right, it's my imagination. So I'm going to drop the ravel cord down between the 2 beds and pull it down, just leaving enough on this side to lay it in the channel between the 2 beds, and put this side down through the gap on the left. Make sure I'm not caught up in any sinker posts or needles. Doesn't seem to want to cooperate today. I'll just pick that off of there. Make sure I'm not caught in any sinker posts. There, it's laying in the channels in between the 2 beds, like that. Now I hold the ends down when I start to knit, just to make sure it stays in place. So I've done my 3 circular rows, and now I want to set my machine up to knit my English rib. And in order to do this, it needs to tuck in one direction only on the knitter. So I set my cam dial to tuck as instructed in the operating table. And then in order to make sure it only does it in one direction, I just move one of the side levers to the triangle, and that's the instruction to the knitter bed to pattern. I put that back to triangle on the right hand side because it's telling me to move the right one. The left one stays at circle, so it means that when it's moving from left to right, it will tuck those needles. When I come back the other way, it will knit them. I reset my set lever on my ribber carriage to 1 and change my tension dial setting to 4 on both dials. So that's all set. Hold the ends of my ravel cord down, reset my row counter if it's critical to me, how many rows I'm doing, and then just start knitting. changing hands. Now, as I'm going to and fro, I can see that every other row on the knitter is not being knitted in, it's tucking it. And after you've done about 10 rows or so, add in edge weights, which are these little bits of metal that look like number 7s. They're sometimes called the 7 hangers. And you just suspend a weight on the end of it, bring it up between the 2 beds and hook it over the edge of the knitting. I don't know if you can see that, it's going in there. Again, it's, I do a little, try to get a little close up. Whoops. I'm trying to do this with, it's there, sitting on those needles there. I'll do the same thing on the other side. And these ensure that the edge stitches knit off correctly, and move them up every 10, 12, 14 rows, something like that, depending on the thickness of your yarn. I'm using a 3-ply yarn today. It's fairly fine yarn, which should knit up perfectly okay on the tension dial 4. If I was using my normal UK 4-ply, I would probably pull the tension dial up a little bit to 6 or 7. Carry on knitting. And that's all there is to it. So to do your English rib or half fisherman's rib, where you're just tucking on the main bed, you have your side lever. I don't think it matters which one, to be honest. One of your side levers set to the triangle, in this case it's the right one as per instruction book, and then your knitter cam set to tuck. Other than that, all the settings are exactly the same as for 1x1. Right, let's take it out and have a little look, shall we? Take the edge weights out first. You don't want any of these weights dropping on your feet because they're heavy. And then the ribber weights off. And then I want to find my scissors and cut the yarn as near as I can to the knitting. This one, ping. Just run the carriage across. I'm going to set my knitter carriage to stocking stitch to make sure that it will drop the stitches. Take it off. So you can see the difference between the knitter side and the ribber side. And if I take the comb out, set that on one side, you can now see how the ravel cord, just when you pull it together, gets rid of that loose floppy edge. It works a treat. It's not quite so effective on this English rib because of the tucking. The edge stitches are in any case looser, and the whole stitch pattern itself is looser. There you have it. You've got your tucked stitch on this side. Hope you can see that it's different to the regular rib on the other side. There you go, English rib. I will do a second video to show the swung variations of this, to try and keep these films a bit shorter and sweeter. I also hope you can hear me a lot more clearly than on some of my previous videos, as people have been saying that they find it difficult to hear what I'm saying. But I put the iPad on a different side to me so that the microphone is right next to my face rather than being several feet away. And I will try and remember not to mutter and to keep my English enunciation nice and clear for you all. On the second video, as I said, I will look at the swung variations of the rib.